The Arconian War Council chamber hummed with the low vibration of its gravity stabilizers. The vast viewport behind the central dais, offering a spectacular view of Novalis. The contested planet hung like a blue-green jewel against the velvet backdrop of space, its continents partially obscured by swirling cloud formations. General Sareth stood at the viewport, hands clasped behind his back, his scales shifting from deep purple to a contemplative blue as he surveyed what would soon be another conquest for the glorious Arconian Empire. "The human resistance continues to be troublesome," he said, not turning to face the assembled council members. His voice carried the distinctive metallic resonance of all Arconians, but with the deeper timbre that marked his noble lineage. "Though I hardly need remind this council that troublesome is not the same as threatening." The 7 members of his war council sat in tiered seating, their postures rigid with military discipline. Only Councillor Vell showed any visible reaction, her scales flashing a momentary crimson before settling back to the formal indigo expected at official proceedings. "Perhaps troublesome is an understatement, General," Vell said, her voice sharp. 3 supply convoys ambushed in the Western Territories, an entire communications array disabled in the Southern Hemisphere. The humans are becoming more than a mere irritation. Sareth turned slowly, his 4 eyes narrowing slightly. "Counselor, your concern is noted. But let us maintain perspective. The humans possess no orbital capabilities, no advanced shielding technology, and their weapons are primitive at best. We have the tactical and technological advantage in every measurable category." "Science liaison." Toran cleared his throat, the sound deliberately subdued as protocol demanded when interrupting a superior. His scales were the pale blue of the academic caste, marked with the silver patterns that designated his specialization in weapons technology. "If I may, General," Toran said, activating the holographic display at the center of the chamber. "Our intelligence suggests the human resistance is growing more organized under the leadership of one Captain Lyra Dane, a former Earth Alliance officer with significant combat experience." The hologram displayed a human female, her dark skin contrasting with short silver hair. Her eyes were what caught Sareth's attention, steady, calculating, showing neither fear nor resignation in the Imperial identification capture. "Captain Dane has unified several previously independent resistance cells," Toran continued. "And while I agree their technology is vastly inferior to ours, their tactical adaptability has proven unexpected." Sareth flicked a dismissive hand through the hologram, dispersing it. "All the more reason to proceed with the armament initiative. The Imperial Senate has expressed concerns about our methods of pacification. They feel a more benevolent approach might yield better results with less negative sentiment throughout the sector." "Benevolence," Vell nearly spat the word. "Is that what we're calling strategic weakness now?" "It is neither benevolence nor weakness, Counselor," Sareth replied coolly. "It is calculated strategy. We will supply the human settlements with our older generation plasma rifles, the Mark IV models decommissioned after the Proxima campaign. They are outdated by our standards but will seem advanced to humans. This achieves 2 objectives. It presents the Empire as generous, while ensuring the humans have standardized weapons that our defensive systems are already calibrated to counter." Toran's scales rippled with slight unease. "Are we certain this approach is without risk? General, even outdated plasma technology could—" "The Mark IVs are designed with integral limiters," Sareth interrupted. "Their range and power output are fixed. They cannot be modified without specialized equipment that humans simply do not possess. More importantly, they emit a distinct energy signature that our sensors can track with precision." He smiled, revealing teeth like polished obsidian. "In essence, we are giving them the means to identify themselves as combatants, while ensuring they pose no genuine threat." The council chamber fell silent as the members contemplated the strategy. It was Science Liaison Toran who finally spoke, his voice carefully neutral. And the human leader, this Captain Dane, do we have intelligence on how she might respond to such an offering? Sareth's scales shimmered with amusement. She will accept, of course. What choice does she have? Refuse superior weapons for her people out of pride? No. Captain Dane will take what we offer, believing she has somehow won a concession from the mighty Arconian Empire. He turned back to the viewport, gazing down at Novalis. And in doing so, she will seal the fate of her resistance. The distribution of the Mark IV plasma rifles proceeded as planned. Arconian diplomats presented the weapons as a gesture of goodwill, a recognition of the human's right to self-defense, while negotiations for the future of Novalis continued. The Empire's propaganda networks broadcast footage of grateful human colonists receiving the gleaming weapons, their faces showing a carefully edited mixture of relief and gratitude. What the broadcasts didn't show was the secret meeting taking place in the underground command center of the human resistance, 3 kilometers beneath the surface of the northern continent. Captain Lyra Dane turned one of the Mark IV rifles over in her hands, her expression unreadable as her fingers traced the elegant alien craftsmanship. The command center was a repurposed mining facility, its walls reinforced with salvaged materials, illuminated by a mixture of emergency lighting and newer fixtures cobbled together from whatever the resistance could scavenge. Around a large central table stood her 5 most trusted lieutenants, each examining their own rifle with varying degrees of suspicion. "It's a trap," said Commander Rivera, the stocky, former mining engineer who now led their defensive operations. "Has to be. Why would they suddenly decide to arm us unless these things have some kind of tracking beacon? Or worse, a self-destruct mechanism." Dane didn't immediately respond. Instead, she raised the rifle, sighting along its length toward a distant target marker on the far wall. The weapon was surprisingly light, its balance perfect. Too perfect. "You're right that it's a trap, Miguel," she finally said, lowering the rifle. "But not the kind you're thinking of. These weapons are fully functional. The Arconians want us to use them." "Why?" asked Lieutenant Kezia Nowak, the youngest of her officers but also their most gifted tactician. "What do they gain by giving us better firepower?" Dane placed the rifle on the table and activated the command center's main display. Images of Arconian military formations appeared, along with technical specifications that had cost the lives of 3 infiltration specialists to obtain. "They gain predictability," Dane explained. "Standard Imperial doctrine when facing inferior forces is to supply them with outdated but trackable technology. It's how they conquered the Rigelian systems 50 years ago. These weapons emit a specific energy signature that their sensors are calibrated to detect and counter. They're hoping we'll standardize our forces with these rifles, making us easier to monitor and neutralize." Dr. Elias Chen, formerly of the Earth Alliance Xenotechnology Division, stepped forward. His weathered face creased in thought. "There's something else," he said, picking up one of the rifles. "I've been studying the few Arconian weapons we've managed to salvage from battlefield casualties. These Mark IVs have integrated limiters, hard-coded restrictions on power output, firing rate, and effective range." "So they're hobbled," Rivera said with disgust. "Fancy-looking toys to keep us occupied while they finish positioning their forces." "I didn't say that was the end of the story," Dr. Chen replied with the ghost of a smile. He tapped a sequence on his tablet, and a new set of schematics appeared on the main display. "The limiters are sophisticated, yes, but they're calibrated for Arconian physiological interfaces. The Arconians never considered that humans might reconfigure the baseline parameters." Dane's eyes lit up with understanding. "You're saying we can modify them?" "With the right approach, yes," Chen confirmed. "The Empire designed these weapons with the assumption that only Arconians would ever use or service them. It's a blind spot born of arrogance. They simply cannot conceive of lesser species. understanding their technology well enough to subvert it. Dane picked up the rifle again, a slow smile spreading across her face. Then let's make sure their first clue is when these gifts start behaving in ways they never imagined. She looked around at her officers, determination hardening her features. Elias, I want you and your team working on these modifications immediately. Kasia, start developing new tactical approaches that will exploit whatever advantages Dr. Chen can give us. Miguel, increase security around all our research facilities if the Arconians get even a hint of what we're doing. They'll hit us with everything they have. The officers nodded, a new energy permeating the room as the potential of their situation began to dawn on them. They think they're being clever, Dane said, her voice low but intense. They think they're manipulating us into a position of weakness, but they've just handed us the key to changing this entire conflict. She set the rifle down with deliberate care. Let's show our Imperial friends what happens when you underestimate human ingenuity. 3 weeks later, on the outskirts of Settlement P-17 in Novalis's Western Highlands, an Arconian reconnaissance team moved with practiced precision through the dense, alien forest. Their armor gleamed dully in the filtered light, adaptive camouflage systems adjusting to the ever-changing patterns of sunlight through the canopy. Squad leader Mevix consulted his tactical display, satisfied that they remained undetected by the primitive human sensors they had easily identified and bypassed. Perimeter sweep complete, he subvocalized, the words transmitted directly to his 4 squad members through their neural links. Settlement defenses are minimal, mostly manual weapons emplacements with a few automated systems of local manufacture. Nothing that poses a significant threat to our armor. Biosigns indicate approximately 200 humans within the settlement boundaries, reported Specialist Thrave, the team's sensor operator. Consistent with previous intelligence assessments. Any evidence of the distributed weapons? Asked Mevix. Energy signatures consistent with Mark IV plasma rifles detected at multiple locations within the settlement. Thrave confirmed. As expected, they appear to be using them without modification. Mevix's scales shifted to a pleased amber. The mission was proceeding exactly according to plan. This settlement, like a dozen others they had surveyed, had accepted the Empire's gifts and integrated them into their defense strategy. Every activated rifle was a beacon to Arconian sensors, providing valuable intelligence on resistance capabilities and deployments. Complete the survey and prepare for extraction, Mevix ordered. Command will be pleased with... The warning from his armor systems came a microsecond too late. A burst of plasma fire struck Specialist Thrave squarely in the chest, the intensity of the blast overwhelming his shields and searing through his armor before he could even register the attack. He collapsed without a sound, his scales already graying in death. Contact! Mevix shouted, dropping into a defensive crouch as his training took over. Multiple hostiles, bearing... A second plasma burst cut through the air, striking another of his squad with devastating precision. This couldn't be right. The Mark IV rifles didn't have this kind of range or penetrating power. More importantly, their sensors should have detected the energy buildup before the weapons discharged. Defensive formation, Mevix commanded, activating his armor's emergency shield protocols. Identify targets and return fire. But his remaining squad members were already under sustained attack from plasma weapons that seemed to be firing from impossible ranges and with impossible power. What was more disturbing, their armor's targeting systems couldn't locate the source of the attacks. The plasma signatures didn't match any known pattern, despite clearly being derived from Arconian technology. Mevix managed to fire 3 blind bursts into the forest before a plasma bolt struck him from behind, somehow bypassing his reinforced rear shields and burning through his armor's power core. As consciousness faded, his last thought was one of confusion rather than fear. The humans shouldn't have been able to do this. It wasn't possible. 20 minutes later, Captain Dane emerged from the forest's edge, accompanied by a small strike team carrying modified Mark IV rifles. They moved with practiced efficiency, securing the area around the fallen Arconian reconnaissance team. "Confirm all targets neutralized," Dane ordered, kneeling beside the Arconian leader to check for life signs. Finding none, she activated her comm unit. "Strike Team Alpha to base. Ambush successful. 5 Arconian scouts eliminated with 0 casualties on our side. The modifications worked exactly as Dr. Chen predicted." "Excellent work, Captain," came the response. "What about their communications?" "Jammed from the moment we engaged," Dane confirmed. "They didn't get a warning out. Recovery team is on the way to collect the bodies and all salvageable technology." She paused, looking at the fallen Arconians with a mixture of satisfaction and gravity. "Make sure Dr. Chen gets the performance data from our weapons. The modified harmonic resonators exceeded expectations, but I noticed some power fluctuation on the 3rd and 4th shots." "Acknowledged. Base out." Dane stood, surveying her team as they efficiently secured the ambush site. The modified rifles had performed beyond their most optimistic projections. By recalibrating the energy harmonics and bypassing the integrated limiters, Dr. Chen's team had transformed the outdated weapons into something the Arconians had never anticipated: plasma rifles with extended range, enhanced penetration capability, and energy signatures that confounded Imperial targeting systems. "They never saw it coming," said Lieutenant Nowak, coming to stand beside her captain. The expressions on their faces, well, as much as Arconians have expressions, it was pure shock. "They're not used to being outmaneuvered," Dane replied. "Especially not by species they consider technologically inferior." She watched as her team began the process of moving the Arconian bodies. This was just a reconnaissance team. When news of this reaches their command, they'll respond with force. "We'll be ready," Nowak said with quiet confidence. "The modifications are being implemented across all resistance cells. Within 2 weeks, every Mark IV rifle in human hands will be transformed." Dane nodded, her eyes on the horizon where the gleaming spire of an Arconian command outpost was just visible through the atmosphere. "This is just the beginning, Kasia. The real test comes when they realize what they're actually facing." In high orbit above Novalis, aboard the Imperial warship Arcadius, General Sareth received the report of the lost reconnaissance team with controlled fury. His scales had settled into a deep crimson that none of his officers dared comment on as he stalked the length of the command deck. "Impossible," he muttered, reviewing the last transmitted data from squad leader Mevix's armor. "The humans cannot have weapons capable of penetrating our advanced shielding. And even if they did, our sensors would have detected the energy signatures." "Science liaison." Torin stood nearby, his own scales a troubled lavender as he analyzed the fragmented data. "The final transmissions are concerning, General. They suggest the reconnaissance team was engaged by weapons with Arconian energy signatures, but with characteristics that don't match any known configuration in our database." "Are you suggesting the humans have developed their own plasma-based weapons?" Sareth demanded, his voice sharp with disbelief. "No, General," Torin replied carefully. "I believe they have modified the Mark IV rifles we provided." The statement hung in the air like a physical presence. Around the command deck, officers paused in their duties, attention drawn to the confrontation despite their training. "Modified," Sareth repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "The Mark IVs have integrated limiters. They cannot be modified without specialized equipment and detailed knowledge of Arconian weapons architecture." Torin hesitated, aware that he was treading on dangerous ground. "With respect, General, I believe we may have underestimated human technological adaptability. The Resistance leader, Captain Dane, has several former Earth Alliance scientists among her advisors. Our intelligence indicates they've been conducting extensive research on salvaged Arconian technology for months." Sareth's secondary eyelids flickered rapidly, a sign of intense agitation among his kind. You were consulted on the armament initiative. Liaison Torin, you assured this command that the Mark IVs posed no security risk. Based on all available data and historical precedent, they should not have, Torin insisted, bringing up a holographic display of the weapon's internal architecture. The limiters are integrated at the quantum level, with multiple redundant systems. No non-Arconian species has ever successfully bypassed such safeguards. Yet it appears the humans have done precisely that, came a new voice. Counselor Vell entered the command deck, her scales shifting between crimson and deep violet anger, tempered with calculation. The question now is not how they accomplish this feat, but how we respond to this development. Sareth turned to face the viewport, his posture rigid. We crush them, of course, immediately and without mercy, before this technological aberration can spread among the resistance. The Imperial Senate has expressed concerns about excessive force against the colonists. Torin reminded him quietly. The armament initiative was specifically designed to avoid the appearance of brutal suppression. The situation has changed, Vell countered. The humans have weaponized our goodwill against us. The Senate will understand the necessity of decisive action once they review the data from the reconnaissance team. Sareth was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the blue-green curve of Novalis below. When he spoke again, his voice was coldly resolute. Prepare a battle group, 3 cruisers with full complement of dropships and armored units. I want them ready to deploy within 6 hours. He turned to fix Torin with all 4 eyes. And liaison. I expect a full analysis of possible modifications to the Mark IVs. I want to know exactly what we're facing, and I want to know before we engage the human forces. Yes, General, Torin acknowledged, already calculating the immense challenge before him. Understanding how humans had subverted Arconian technology would require thinking in ways that went against his entire training and cultural framework. But as he left the command deck, a part of him, a part he was careful to keep hidden from his superior officers, felt a flicker of something unexpected. Admiration. Dr. Elias Chen worked tirelessly in the makeshift laboratory that had once been a mining equipment maintenance bay. Around him, a team of engineers and scientists, a mixture of former academic researchers and self-taught colonists with natural aptitude, swarmed over workbenches covered with disassembled Mark IV rifles and improvised diagnostic equipment. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and machine oil, and the constant hum of power generators provided a backdrop to the intense concentration that filled the room. The resonance modulator is still showing fluctuations after the 3rd sequential discharge, Chen said, not looking up from the open rifle in front of him. We need to stabilize the harmonic pattern, or we risk catastrophic feedback during sustained fire. What if we recalibrate the phase discriminators, suggested technician Yamamoto, sliding a data pad across the workbench. I've been analyzing the energy flow patterns. If we introduce a controlled variance in the discriminator sequence, it might prevent the harmonic buildup that's causing the fluctuations. Chen studied the calculations, his eyebrows rising slightly. This is unconventional, he said after a moment. The Arconians designed the system with absolute stability in mind. They'd never introduced deliberate variance into a weapon system. Exactly, Yamamoto replied with a slight smile. They think linearly everything has to be perfect, predictable, and controlled. But sometimes a little controlled chaos is exactly what you need for stability in complex systems. Chen's face broke into a wide grin. Hideki, you might have just solved our problem. Let's implement this modification and run a full diagnostic cycle. The lab door slid open, and Captain Dane entered, followed by Lieutenant Nowak. Both women were still dressed in field gear, dust from the ambush site clinging to their boots. Dr. Chen, Dane greeted him. I hear you've been making progress. Chen straightened, wiping his hands on a cloth. Captain, your timing is excellent. We believe we've solved the power fluctuation issue. Technician Yamamoto had the insight to introduce controlled variants into the phase discriminators, something the Arconians would never consider, due to their rigid approach to weapons design. "Will it work?" Dane asked, coming to examine the modified rifle. "In theory, yes. We're about to run a full diagnostic cycle to confirm." Chen gestured to another workbench, where several other modified rifles were arranged. "We've also been working on your other request, adapting the technology for larger applications." Dane moved to the second workbench, where what appeared to be a much larger version of the rifle was taking shape. "The plasma trap. We're calling it a resonance array now," Chen explained, leading her to the partially assembled device. "It utilizes the same principles as the modified rifles, but scaled up significantly. When complete, it will be capable of projecting a concentrated plasma field that can disrupt Arconian shield harmonics at a much greater range than individual weapons." "How many do we have?" "We've completed 3 prototype units," Chen replied. "With the materials currently available, we can probably construct another 12 within the next 10 days. Dane nodded slowly, considering the implications. The Arconians will respond to the ambush probably with overwhelming force. They'll expect us to use the modified rifles as individual weapons, employing the same tactics as before." "But you have something else in mind," Chen observed, recognizing the strategic glint in her eye. "I do," Dane confirmed. "Kaja, bring up the terrain map of Sector 7. Lieutenant Nowak activated her tablet, projecting a holographic map of a mountainous region 200 kilometers south of their current position. "Ceres Ridge," she explained. "A narrow canyon system with high walls of dense mineral composition that should partially shield our energy signatures from orbital detection. The perfect location for an ambush," Dane continued. "But not just any ambush. Dr. Chen, how quickly can your team adapt the resonance arrays for remote deployment and synchronized activation?" Chen studied the map, his mind racing through the technical challenges. "With sufficient resources and personnel, 3 days, maybe 2 if we work around the clock." "You'll have whatever you need," Dane assured him. "Because when the Arconians come looking for us, and they will, I intend to give them a demonstration of human innovation they'll never forget." As the Resistance prepared for the inevitable Arconian response, Science Liaison, Torin found himself in an increasingly uncomfortable position aboard the Arcadius. The analysis of the reconnaissance team's final data transmissions had yielded disturbing insights into what the humans had accomplished with the Mark IV rifles. "They've completely reconfigured the harmonic resonance patterns," he explained to General Sareth and the assembled War Council. The holographic display between them showed the internal architecture of a standard Mark IV, alongside a theoretical model of the human modifications. By altering the phase discriminators and bypassing the quantum limiters, they've not only increased the weapon's range and penetrating power, but also changed their energy signatures to be unrecognizable to our standard detection protocols. "How is this possible?" Sareth demanded, his scales alternating between crimson and black fury and disbelief. "The limiters are integrated at the quantum level. The tools to manipulate such systems don't exist outside of Arconian military facilities." Torin's scales rippled uncomfortably. "The humans appear to have approached the problem differently than we would have. Rather than trying to remove or disable the limiters, which would indeed require technology they don't possess, they've essentially tricked the weapon systems into operating beyond their program parameters." "Tricked," Counselor Vell repeated incredulously. "These are not sentient systems to be deceived. Liaison. They are precision instruments designed by the finest minds in the Empire." "Perhaps reconfigured would be a more accurate term," Torin amended. "They've introduced controlled variants into systems designed for absolute stability. It's an approach no Arconian engineer would ever consider. It violates all our fundamental principles of weapons design." "And yet it works," Sareth said grimly. "The question is, how do we counter it?" Torin hesitated before responding. Our standard countermeasures will be ineffective against these modified weapons. We would need to recalibrate our shields and defensive systems to recognize and neutralize the altered energy signatures. How long would such recalibration require? Sareth asked. For a complete battle group, at least 7 standard cycles. Unacceptable, Sareth snapped. The battle group deploys in less than 2 cycles. We cannot delay our response while the humans potentially spread this technology throughout their resistance network. Then, we must rely on overwhelming force, Vel suggested. Even with enhanced weapons, the humans cannot stand against the full might of an Imperial battle group. We will simply obliterate them from orbit if necessary. Torin's scales paled slightly. With respect, Counselor, orbital bombardment would violate at least 3 provisions of the colonial engagement protocols ratified by the Senate. The political repercussions would be severe, particularly given the Empire's recent public commitment to a more measured approach on Novalis. The chamber fell silent as the council members considered the dilemma. It was Sareth who finally broke the silence, his voice hard with determination. We will proceed as planned. The battle group will deploy to the surface and engage the human forces directly. Yes, their modified weapons pose a greater threat than anticipated, but they remain fundamentally outmatched in terms of numbers, armor, and overall firepower. He fixed Torin with a penetrating stare. You will accompany the battle group. Liaison. Your expertise regarding these modifications may prove valuable in the field. Torin's scales involuntarily flashed pale blue with surprise. Field deployment was highly unusual for a science liaison. As you command, General, he said, keeping his voice steady despite his inner turmoil. As the council members filed out of the chamber, Sareth held Torin back with a gesture. When they were alone, the general's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Your admiration for the humans' ingenuity has not gone unnoticed. Liaison, I would advise you to remember where your loyalties lie. Torin lowered his gaze respectfully. My loyalty to the Empire is absolute, General. See that it remains so, Sareth replied. Because if I detect even a hint of wavering commitment during this operation, you will not return from the surface. Am I understood? Perfectly, General. As Torin left the council chamber, his mind was in turmoil. He had devoted his life to the advancement of Arconian weapons technology, secure in the belief that the Empire's technological superiority was both inevitable and right. But the humans' adaptation of the Mark IV rifles challenged everything he had been taught about the hierarchy of species and their capabilities. More troubling still was the realization forming in the back of his mind, a realization he dared not articulate even to himself. What the humans had achieved with limited resources and primitive facilities wasn't just impressive. It was beautiful. The Ceres Ridge Canyon system stretched for 27 kilometers through the rugged highlands of Novalis's southern continent. Its steep walls rose nearly 300 meters in some sections, composed of dense mineral deposits that partially blocked sensor scans and communication signals. Narrow at its entrance, the canyon widened into a series of interconnected ravines before constricting again at its far end, a natural funnel that had served the planet's native herbivores as a migration route before human colonization. Now it would serve a different purpose. Final resonance array in position, reported Chief Engineer Marquez over the tactical comm network. Calibration complete and synchronized with the central control node. Acknowledged, Captain Dane replied from her position at the command post concealed in a small cave, halfway up the canyon's eastern wall. Status of all defensive positions. All teams report ready, Captain. Lieutenant Nowak confirmed, studying the tactical display that showed the positions of 200 resistance fighters distributed throughout the canyon system. Camouflage netting is in place. The Arconians won't detect our presence until they're well inside the engagement zone. Dane nodded, her expression grim but determined. Intelligence from their network of sympathizers among the settlement populations indicated that an Arconian battle group had deployed from orbit 6 hours earlier. 3 cruiser-class vessels carrying approximately 800 troops, supported by armored vehicles and atmospheric fighter craft. It was, by any conventional assessment, an overwhelming force against their 200 fighters. But Dane was counting on the fact that this would not be a conventional engagement. "Any word from our forward observers?" she asked. "Last report placed the Arconian ground forces 30 kilometers north of our position and moving steadily in our direction." Nowak replied. "Their deployment pattern suggests they're expecting resistance along their approach vector." "Good," Dane said. "That means our deception is working. The false communications traffic should convince them that our main force is attempting to evacuate civilian settlements in the Northern Territory." "What if they decide to bypass this area entirely?" asked Rivera, who was coordinating the defensive teams. "They won't," Dane said with certainty. "Our ambush of their reconnaissance team hurt their pride as much as their operations. Arconians don't respond well to being outmaneuvered, especially by species they consider inferior. They'll follow our trail right into the canyon because they can't conceive of humans setting a trap they couldn't detect." The tactical display chimed, indicating an incoming communication from one of their forward scouts. "Captain, Arconian Vanguard has reached the canyon entrance. Heavy armor in the lead, followed by troop transports, fighter craft maintaining high-altitude patrol patterns." "As expected," Dane acknowledged. "All teams maintain communications discipline from this point forward. Use emergency channels only. Wait for my signal to initiate the primary sequence." The command post fell silent, the tension palpable as they watched the tactical display showing the Arconian forces entering the mouth of the canyon. The Empire's troops moved with the precision and confidence of a military that had conquered 100 worlds, their formations textbook perfect as they advanced into the narrowing passage. Aboard the lead Arconian armored vehicle, Commander Telvix surveyed the canyon with professional scrutiny. The massive 8-wheeled transport provided an elevated viewing position through armored viewport slits, allowing him to observe the terrain while remaining protected by the vehicle's substantial shielding. "Sensor readings," he inquired of his operations officer. "Minimal activity." "Commander," came the response. "Some residual energy signatures consistent with human transport vehicles, but no current indications of a significant force." "The terrain favors defensive positions," Telvix noted, studying the high canyon walls. "Conduct continuous sweeps for hidden emplacements or ambush points." "Already in progress, sir. All scans negative so far." Telvix felt a prickle of unease despite the reassuring reports. The human resistance had proven more adaptable than anticipated, and this canyon with its sensor-dampening mineral composition and numerous potential hiding places would be an ideal location for an ambush. "Deploy scout drones to the high ground," he ordered. "I want visual confirmation of what our sensors are telling us." As the scout drones launched from the armored vehicle, Science Liaison Torin watched from his position in the command transport, several vehicles back in the column. He had been assigned to Commander Telvix's battle group, as General Sareth had ordered, though the field commander had made it clear that he considered the scientist's presence an unwelcome complication. "The mineral composition of these canyon walls is fascinating," Torin observed to no one in particular, studying the readings on his specialized sensor package. The density of paramagnetic elements would create significant interference with standard scanning frequencies. The security officer assigned to monitor him or guard him, Torin suspected, gave a non-committal grunt. Torin had noted that most of the combat personnel regarded him with a mixture of indifference and suspicion, particularly after word had spread that he had expressed excessive interest in human weapons modifications. His attention was drawn to a small anomaly in his sensor readings, a faint but distinctive energy pattern emanating from multiple points throughout the canyon. It didn't match any known human technology, nor did it align with standard Arconian signatures. In fact, it most closely resembled. Torin's scales paled dramatically as realization struck him. "Contact the commander immediately," he said urgently to the security officer. "We need to halt the advance and withdraw from this canyon." The officer stared at him with obvious skepticism. "On what grounds? Liaison." "The humans have deployed," Torin began. But he was interrupted by a sudden flurry of activity as alert signals blared throughout the transport. "Multiple energy signatures detected," announced the vehicle's sensor operator. "Configuration unknown, but power levels are spiking across the battlefield." In the command post high above the canyon floor, Captain Dane watched as the Arconian column advanced deeper into the trap. When the lead vehicle reached the precise center of the canyon, the focal point where all 15 resonance arrays were aligned, she gave the order. "Initiate primary sequence, all arrays to full power." Throughout the canyon, carefully concealed resonance arrays, each one a scaled-up version of the modified plasma rifle technology, activated simultaneously. Unlike conventional weapons, they didn't fire destructive bolts of energy. Instead, they projected intersecting fields of modulated plasma that created a resonance effect specifically calibrated to the frequency of Arconian shield systems. Below, the effect was immediate and devastating. Arconian vehicles suddenly found their shield generators overwhelmed by harmonic feedback loops that the designers had never anticipated. Warning alarms shrieked throughout the column as shield matrices collapsed, leaving the supposedly impervious armored vehicles vulnerable. "Second phase," Dane ordered calmly. "All strike teams, engage designated targets." 200 resistance fighters, positioned on the canyon ridges and concealed outcroppings, opened fire with their modified Mark IV rifles. The weapons had been further enhanced since the reconnaissance team ambush, with improved stability and penetrating power. Plasma bolts rained down on the Arconian column, striking with surgical precision at the now unshielded weapon emplacements and propulsion systems. Commander Telvix's voice roared over the battle group's communication network, fighting to be heard over the chaos of alarms and damage reports. "Return fire, target those ridge positions." But the Arconian gunners found themselves in an impossible situation. Their targeting systems, calibrated to detect standard energy weapons, struggled to lock onto the modified human rifles. More critically, without functioning shields. The vehicle's weapon systems were exposed to the precisely aimed fire from above. In the command transport, Science Liaison, Torin clung to a support strut as the vehicle shuddered under multiple impacts. His scientific mind, even in the midst of danger, couldn't help but analyze what was happening. "Resonance technology," he murmured in horrified admiration. "They've adapted the rifle modifications to create synchronized fields that induce harmonic breakdown in our shield matrices. It's brilliant." The security officer gave him a disgusted look before rushing to assist the crew in attempting to restore shield functionality. Outside, the situation was deteriorating rapidly for the Arconian forces. Fighter craft swooped down to provide air support, only to find their own shields failing as they entered the resonance field. 2 were shot down in quick succession by concentrated rifle fire from the canyon ridges, while the others pulled up sharply, retreating to a safe distance but rendering them ineffective in the battle below. "Commander," reported the communications officer in Telvix's vehicle. "We've lost contact with the rear third of our column. Forward units report critical shield failures and mounting casualties." Telvix's scales had darkened to the deep blue of controlled rage. "Order all units to push forward at maximum speed. We'll break through this ambush and deploy in the wider section of the canyon ahead." "Sir," objected his second-in-command, "without functional shields, the casualties will be—" "The alternative is to remain here and be systematically destroyed," Telvix snapped. "Forward all units." The Arconian vehicles lurched into motion, accelerating as much as the rough terrain allowed. Plasma fire continued to rain down from above, picking off exposed weapon systems and damaging propulsion units. 3 transports were immobilized in the first minute of the advance, their crews abandoning the vehicles, only to find themselves exposed to even more precisely targeted fire. In the command post, Lieutenant Nowak reported the Arconian movement with growing excitement. "They're doing exactly as you predicted, Captain. They're attempting to push through to the wider section of the canyon." Dane nodded grimly. "And right into the secondary trap. Activate the resonance arrays in sectors 5 through 8. Let's make sure they understand the full implications of what they're facing." As the battered Arconian column reached what they believed would be the relative safety of the wider canyon section, 4 additional resonance arrays, larger and more powerful than the ones they had already encountered, activated simultaneously. The effect was catastrophic. The few vehicles that had managed to partially restore shield functionality immediately lost them again. More critically, the intensified resonance field began to affect other systems, causing weapon misfires and power core fluctuations. "This is impossible," Commander Telvik said, staring at the tactical display as it flickered and died, along with most of his vehicle's primary systems. "No human technology should be capable of this level of disruption." "It's not human technology," came a voice from behind him. Science Liaison. Torin had made his way to the command compartment, his scales a troubled mixture of colors. "It's our technology adapted and implemented in ways we never considered possible." Before Telvix could respond, the communication system crackled to life on the emergency channel, the only one still functioning. "Arconian forces. This is Captain Lyra Dane of the Novalis Resistance." The human's voice was clear and confident. "Your battle group is surrounded, your shields are disabled, and your weapon systems are compromised. You have 2 options: surrender and live, or continue fighting and die." Telvix's scales flushed crimson with fury. "This is Commander Telvix of the Imperial Battle Group Helix. We do not surrender to inferior forces." "Look around you, Commander," Dane replied, her voice level. "Your technological superiority has been neutralized. Your tactical advantage has been turned against you. What remains is a simple calculation of survival." There was a pause before she continued. "I'm offering terms. Your wounded will receive medical attention. Your troops will be treated according to the colonial engagement protocols that your own empire has signed. In return, you will order all Arconian forces to withdraw from the southern continent." Telvix's secondary eyelids flickered rapidly as he struggled with the unthinkable decision before him. Around him, his officers waited in tense silence, the sounds of continuing plasma fire and the occasional explosion punctuating the moment. It was Science Liaison Torin who finally spoke. "Commander, I believe Captain Dane is offering us an honorable resolution to an untenable situation. From a scientific perspective, what the humans have achieved here represents a fundamental shift in the tactical reality. This is no longer a battle we can win through conventional means." Telvix turned all 4 eyes on the scientist, searching for any sign of treachery or weakness. Finding none, he slowly activated the emergency communication system. "Captain Dane, this is Commander Telvix. I am prepared to discuss your terms." Aboard the Arcadius in high orbit, General Sereth received news of the battle group's defeat with cold fury. His war council had assembled once again in the ship's command chamber, but this time the atmosphere was one of stunned disbelief rather than confident planning. "Impossible," Counselor Vell said for the 3rd time, her scales fluctuating between crimson and sickly gray. "An entire Imperial battle group cannot have been defeated by human resistance fighters." "The preliminary reports are quite clear, Counselor," replied the communications officer, maintaining a respectful distance from the agitated council members. "Commander Telvix has agreed to a temporary ceasefire and withdrawal from the southern continent. He reports that his forces encountered an advanced weapons technology that neutralized their shields and disrupted critical systems." "And where is Science Liaison?" Torin Sereth demanded. "He was sent specifically to analyze and counter any human weapons modifications." The liaison has requested permission to remain with the battle group. General. He states that direct observation of the human technology is essential to developing effective countermeasures. Sareth's scales darkened ominously. Denied. Order him to return to the Arcadius immediately. I want a full debriefing and explanation for this debacle. Yes, General. As the communications officer withdrew, Vel moved closer to Sareth, her voice dropping to ensure only he could hear. This changes everything. The Senate will demand answers. Our position in the sector could be compromised if word spreads that humans have successfully defeated an Imperial battle group. I am aware of the implications, Counselor, Sareth replied coldly, which is why the situation must be contained and reversed swiftly. We will honor the ceasefire temporarily, only until we can develop countermeasures against whatever technology the humans have deployed. And Liaison Turin, his fascination with human ingenuity, has been noted by several officers. Can he be trusted? Sareth's 4 eyes narrowed slightly. Torin's loyalty will be thoroughly evaluated upon his return. If he has allowed his scientific curiosity to override his duty to the Empire, he will face the appropriate consequences. Vel seemed satisfied with this response and moved away to consult with other council members, left momentarily alone. Sareth turned to the viewport, his gaze fixed on the blue-green surface of Novalis below. His scales shifted subtly, revealing a flicker of an emotion rarely seen in an Imperial commander. 2 days later, aboard the Arconian flagship Arcadius, a delegation from the human resistance was escorted into the vessel's formal conference chamber. Captain Lyra Dane led the small group, accompanied by Lieutenant Nowak and Dr. Chen. They walked with straight backs and level gazes, refusing to be intimidated by the grandeur of the Imperial vessel or the heavily armed guards that surrounded them. The conference chamber was designed to emphasize Arconian superiority, the gravity set slightly stronger than Earth standard, the temperature uncomfortably warm for humans. The seating arranged so that the Imperial representatives would literally look down upon their visitors. None of these manipulations seemed to affect Dane or her companions as they took their assigned places at the conference table. General Sareth entered last, his ceremonial armor gleaming, his scales a carefully controlled indigo that conveyed nothing of his inner thoughts. Science Liaison Torin followed several paces behind, along with Counselor Vel and 2 other high-ranking officers. Captain Dane, Sareth acknowledged with minimal courtesy. You have requested this meeting to discuss terms beyond the temporary ceasefire agreed upon by Commander Telvix. I must inform you that the commander exceeded his authority in negotiating with your forces. Yet you've honored the ceasefire thus far, Dane observed calmly, which suggests you recognize the validity of our position, regardless of protocol concerns. Sareth's scales rippled slightly, the equivalent of a human narrowing their eyes. The Empire has temporarily paused offensive operations while we assess the situation. Do not mistake tactical adjustment for weakness, Captain. I wouldn't dream of it, General, Dane replied with the ghost of a smile. Just as I hope you won't mistake our desire for negotiation as an indication that we cannot continue to defend ourselves effectively. The subtle threat hung in the air between them. Sareth gestured to one of his aides, who activated a holographic display at the center of the table. Our analysis of the weapons deployed against our forces indicates that you have illegally modified Arconian military technology, he stated. Such actions violate at least 7 provisions of the colonial armament protocols. Dr. Chen leaned forward slightly. With respect, General, the protocols specifically prohibit the reverse engineering of Arconian weapons for mass production or distribution to non-signatory parties. They do not, however, restrict modifications for defensive purposes by recognized colonial entities. You are not recognized colonial entities, Counselor Vel interjected sharply. You are insurgents operating outside the authorized colonial governance structure, a structure imposed without consultation, or consent. Lieutenant Nowak countered. The Novalis Accords clearly established the right of human settlements to self-governance, a right the Empire has systematically undermined since establishing its presence in this system. The debate might have escalated further, but Science Liaison Torin cleared his throat, drawing attention. If I may, General, while the legal questions are certainly relevant, perhaps we might first address the technical achievements that have brought us to this impasse. Sareth gave Torin a long, measuring look before nodding once. Proceed, Liaison. Torin activated his own data tablet, which interfaced with the holographic display. The internal schematics of a standard Mark IV plasma rifle appeared, alongside a theoretical model of the human modifications. Captain Dane, Dr. Chen, am I correct in understanding that your forces modified the harmonic resonance patterns of the Mark IV rifles to bypass the integrated limiters? He asked, his scientific curiosity momentarily overriding political considerations. Chen glanced at Dane, who nodded slightly. That's a simplified explanation, but essentially correct, Chen confirmed. We also reconfigured the phase discriminators to create controlled variance in the energy output, which allows for greater range and penetrating power. Torin's scales shifted to a light blue of intellectual excitement. Fascinating. Such an approach would never occur to Arconian weapons engineers. Our entire design philosophy is based on perfect stability and predictability, which is precisely why it worked, Chen explained. Your systems are designed to detect and counter very specific energy signatures. By introducing controlled chaos into the equation, we created weapons that your defensive systems couldn't recognize or neutralize effectively. And the larger resonance arrays deployed in the canyon, Torin asked. An application of the same principles at scale, Chen said. By synchronizing multiple arrays to target the specific frequencies of your shield systems, we could induce harmonic breakdown across a wide area. General Sareth interrupted the technical exchange with a sharp gesture. This academic discussion, while no doubt intellectually stimulating, does not address the fundamental issue. The human resistance has demonstrated hostile intent against Imperial forces and possesses technology that poses a significant threat to our operations on Novalis. We possess technology that allows us to defend ourselves against overwhelming force, Dane corrected him. Technology that you provided, albeit unwittingly. What happens next is your choice, General. Explain, Sareth demanded. Dane leaned forward, her gaze steady. We're prepared to offer an exchange. Knowledge for sovereignty. The Resistance will share the full technical specifications of our modifications and assist your scientists in developing countermeasures. In return for what Vel asked suspiciously, recognition of human settlement autonomy in the southern continent. Dane stated, a binding non-aggression pact between human territories and the Empire, and collaborative research initiatives that benefit both our peoples, rather than exploitative resource extraction that benefits only the Empire. The Arconian representatives exchanged glances, their scales shifting through various colors as they processed this unexpected proposal. It was Science Liaison Torin who broke the silence. General, if I may, what Captain Dane is suggesting represents an unprecedented opportunity. The humans have demonstrated an approach to energy weapons technology that our own scientists have never considered. A collaborative research initiative could yield advances that would benefit the Empire far beyond this single planetary system. You seem remarkably enthusiastic about rewarding those who have killed Imperial soldiers. Liaison, Counselor Vel observed coldly. I am enthusiastic about scientific progress, Counselor, Torin replied evenly, and about avoiding unnecessary further casualties on both sides. General Sareth studied Dane with all four eyes, his expression unreadable. You believe the Imperial Senate would accept such terms after human forces have humiliated an Imperial battle group. I believe the Senate would prefer a peaceful resolution that preserves Imperial interests while avoiding a protracted and costly conflict. Dane replied, especially when that conflict would inevitably involve weapons that have already proven effective against your most advanced defensive systems. The unspoken threat was clear if negotiations failed. The resonance technology would be deployed against other Imperial forces, potentially spreading to human colonies on other worlds. Sareth was silent for a long moment, weighing options and calculating political repercussions. Finally, he spoke. "I will present your proposal to the Senate. Until their decision is rendered, the ceasefire will remain in effect." He rose to his full height, signaling that the meeting was concluded. "But, make no mistake, Captain Dane, if the Senate rejects these terms, the Empire's response will be swift and decisive." "I understand, General," Dane replied, rising as well. "We await the Senate's wisdom in this matter." As the human delegation was escorted from the conference chamber, Science Liaison Torin approached General Sareth. "General, with your permission, I would like to request reassignment." Sareth's scales flickered with surprise. "Reassignment, liaison, to what post?" "I wish to serve as the scientific liaison to the human settlements," Torin said, his voice steady despite the audacity of the request. "If the Senate approves Captain Dane's proposal, someone will need to coordinate the collaborative research initiatives. My experience with both Arconian weapons technology and the human modifications makes me uniquely qualified." "And if the Senate rejects the proposal?" Sareth asked quietly. Torin met his commander's gaze without wavering. "Then I will serve the Empire as I always have, General, with complete loyalty." Sareth studied the scientist for a long moment. "Your fascination with human ingenuity borders on concerning liaison. Not fascination. General. Recognition. The humans have approached problems from angles we would never consider. Their solutions are elegant in their unexpectedness." Torin paused, choosing his next words carefully. "The Empire has conquered many worlds through technological superiority, but perhaps there is something to be gained by learning from those we have previously dismissed as inferior." "A dangerous perspective, Torin." "Perhaps. But is not the purpose of science to challenge perspectives in pursuit of greater understanding?" Sareth made no immediate reply, but as he turned away, his scales briefly shifted to a contemplative shade of violet. "Your request will be noted in my report to the Senate. Until then, you will continue your analysis of the human modifications. We must be prepared for all contingencies." "Yes, General." As Torin left the conference chamber, he found himself experiencing an emotion rare among his kind hope. The confrontation with Captain Dane's forces had shaken the Empire's confidence in ways that might ultimately prove beneficial. The humans had not simply defeated an Imperial battle group. They had challenged fundamental Arconian assumptions about technological development and species hierarchy. Whether the Senate chose peace or renewed conflict, something had changed irreversibly. The Empire had given humans outdated weapons as a gesture of calculated condescension, and in doing so, had unwittingly sparked a revolution in weapons technology that might reshape the balance of power throughout the sector. Somewhere on Novalis, Captain Lyra Dane was probably thinking the same thing. Torin found himself looking forward to their next conversation, preferably one conducted in the spirit of scientific collaboration rather than across a battlefield. The Empire had feared human numbers, human determination, human resilience, but they had never considered the true danger, human ingenuity. They had given humans outdated weapons, and now they feared human tactics. It was, Torin reflected with scientific appreciation, a most elegant irony.